We're live. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Thrilled to have Tyler Christiansen from Funnel Leasing on today. I originally met Tyler 2 years ago at Optech in Maryland at like Bar Harbor, I think it's Bar Harbor or Harbor, whatever it is in Maryland for Optech. I had a quick chat about there. You guys had the awesome booth at the stadium, and you guys had the Melton jackets. It was slick. You guys did a great job making a splash there. And I really appreciate you guys coming on the show to chat. As you've been someone I've been listening to for quite some time with respect to conversation centralization. Love the podcast you guys are doing on Multifamily Unpacked. Love the output you guys are openly sharing from your forum that's coming up. You can speak a bit about that in a second. I think that if anybody is a Funnel Leasing customer, or even if you're just like ears to the ground of what's going on, it's a very valuable conversation that you guys have at that conference. And we appreciate it from the outside that you share some of the proceeds from that to the open audience, because it gives us a chance to all learn about what operators and are thinking, and how, I think specifically how they're saying and how they're expressing their priorities and concerns. It's not often that you get that kind of inside look into the tent. So appreciate that. To everyone listening, if you're catching this on the podcast on Apple, Spotify, just hit favorite, subscribe. That makes it a whole lot easier for people to find us. We can get more guests, great guests like Tyler. If you're catching us on LinkedIn Live, obviously any comments is fun throughout the show, so please engage. It makes it a ton more fun for us. If you're catching this after the fact on LinkedIn Live, then just on LinkedIn, just add any comments there, and Tyler and I both get notified. We'll be able to jump in and answer any questions. So when we talk about getting to hell yes, the premise of getting to hell yes started from a bit of a discovery on my side of figuring out why people, just thinking hard about why people buy, why they commit to change, because buying things feels unusual in the grand scheme of things when you think about the human person, and so that originated into a bit of a discovery about why people buy, why we do these things, and ultimately how you get a hell yes buyer. A hell yes buyer is often in a situation where they've already considered alternatives. They're down funnel in terms of the pipeline, and sometimes they've tried something and failed. And those are the ones that I'm finding are exceptionally frustrated with their options, and they move down funnel a whole lot faster than other ones, but finding them can be complicated. And so that is always an interesting part of the conversation. And I just chatted the other day, and we were chatting earlier about the customer's customer, and hopefully we get time to kind of talk about a little bit of that today and how that's different. This is brought to you by IRCX. IRCX is a remote maintenance and inspection software for multifamily and property management. Help you basically save a truck roll, help you diagnose before you dispatch, and then ultimately do a ton of remote inspections so you can be a whole lot faster with your resident transitions. So this is where I get the commercial ends, and I get to hand it over to Tyler. Tyler, before we kick these things off, we always ask for a little bit of background. How did you end up in this role, and why in God's name would you try and solve this problem head on? What psychological disorder do you suffer from that you would commit to kicking this off? And a bit about your background, the problem that you're solving at Funnel Leasing.
Awesome. Yeah, Guillermo, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. And I think like you, and what I like about this podcast and the framing is, I grew up as a multifamily software salesperson. Now just fortunately get to lead an organization that is helping the largest multifamily operators with some big challenges. And so I love talking with other multifamily sales folks and revenue leaders about helping multifamily operators solve their problems. I mean, that's what I'm passionate about. But to go kind of back in time, I came into the industry. I was already kind of multifamily adjacent. My dad grew up was a financer. He worked in banking industry, real estate banking. He ended up, when I was in college, working for a multifamily developer. And so, the nomenclature of multifamily was kind of in the ether for me. And then just so happened that I got exposure to sales while I was in college. I played soccer in college, needed a part-time job, needed a summer job because, being a coach didn't pay the bills like I'd hoped. And I realized I was good at sales. What I got really fortunate at is that this kind of family background of my dad being essentially, originally in finance and then eventually in asset management. So I'd visited multifamily properties, knew the concepts, but and then the boom of technology that happened in Utah, where I went to school, I went to Brigham Young University. There was the kind of the beginnings of what is now called Silicon Slopes. And so companies like Omniture were acquired by Adobe. That's where Entrata got started. It was called Property Solutions back then. But so I was looking for a sales job, was graduating school, Property Solutions happened to work in the apartment industry. And that's how I first got into it. So I spent a number of years at Property Solutions as an individual seller, learned the industry, learned the language, spent a little bit of time at LRO as well before it was acquired by RealPage. So learned about revenue management, got to really understand the asset management side of the business, and then ultimately came back to Property Solutions when it was Entrata, and ran the national sales organization in 2016 to 2018, I think was the right years. So that's kind of the background and context before what is now Funnel. Was recruited to join what was then called Nestio in 2018. Nestio was a New York City broker management tool, really helped brokers get their listings on StreetEasy and kind of manage their availability. So if that doesn't make sense to you, it's because it was super niche, right? Is that the New York City...
It's just New York City, right?
Exactly. It's actually owned by Zillow. And I didn't know any of this when I was recruited. All I knew was they were trying to solve apartment problems. I liked solving apartment problems, and I was good at helping companies grow their revenue in doing so. But I didn't understand StreetEasy and brokers and the weird world of New York. And ultimately, that was kind of the challenge, is that the technical team and the founding team at Nestio, very talented, very entrepreneurial, in my opinion, now looking in hindsight, just had the wrong TAM. There wasn't really room to grow. And in particular, the problems in a New York City market, although Nestio solved them well, didn't translate to the problems multifamily operators had in Denver and Dallas and Detroit.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
So
I was talking to New York operators, and they're like, New York just runs completely different than anybody else.
No, literally, I know you're from Canada, but Canada is closer to multifamily than New York is, right? And New York, 100%. I mean, I think that the UK may be more similar than New York is. It's just a very bespoke market. And so, it's not surprising you've seen a lot of tech companies come out of the New York market. There's so much talent there, so much capital there.
Sure.
But they almost always struggle, at least for a couple of years, to make the transition from the broker mindset to the multifamily operator mindset. And that's really kind of the transition that I helped bring in. Is in 2019, we officially launched Funnel. So we had 0 CRM customers, but given my background and experience at Entrata, knew there was kind of a market segment that we could serve. So to give you a super short version, we launched the brand and the product in 2019. In 2020, I was asked to take on the role as CEO. Now, here we are 6 years later. We are approaching 2 million apartment units on the product. And, you give kind of the short commercial for what Iris is. Funnel at its core is renter management software, meaning we don't do property management software, accounting, maintenance. We do, CRM, AI, online leasing, resident portal, kind of everything but the property management software. So that's what we do today.
All the acquire part of the pipeline.
Correct. Acquire and then renewal. So we do, not only kind of lead to lease, but then we also do existing customer communications or renter communications and renewals for our customers. But the primary use case where we're used on, the vast majority of units is lead management software. And then usually our customers end up buying, some of the resident communications and resident AI tools.
So going back to 2019, like there were other CRMs out there.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
and AI wasn't where it is today. So why
correct.
did you guys start? Why did you guys decide you need to close? What was the gap you were seeking to close, or why were the existing options just so unacceptable?
Yeah, really good question. And I don't think that I thought maybe like I think today, like if I was ever so fortunate to, start a company from scratch again, I think I have a lot more experience than I did then.
Sure.
I personally wanted to be an entrepreneur, and the idea of going to a smaller stage company was appealing to me. I wasn't truly thinking from first principles. And so to be candid, it was a little bit of, well, how do we iterate on what we have? And if you think about what they had what we would call a syndication product. So for those who have been in multifamily long enough, there was a point in time when people would buy a syndication tool standalone. The most notable one was a company called Vaultware, which sold to MRI, also started by the folks that started LeaseHawk, which Funnel acquired. But Vaultware was taking your inventory, your disparate inventory, sitting in a database somewhere and getting it on the ILSs. Nestio did that in New York City really well. And when I took a step back and looked at that as kind of with my marketing hat, I thought, well, it's a top of funnel tool. And to your question of where did we see the opportunity, I'll give a lot of credit to the guys at Knock. They were already working on solving this problem. And so they were working on, okay, well, you've got the lead. What does the tour schedule process look like? And coming from the world where I was head of sales at Entrata, CRM had not changed from 2012. Like Alliance helped Property Solutions build their CRM tool back in the day. It's funny saying both those words now, like a new person multifamily wouldn't even understand. Alliance was like one of the biggest management companies there were. Property Solutions was the leading marketing platform. But really from 2012 to 2018, lead management didn't change. And so the original problem we saw, which to your point was AI adjacent, was how come we can't automate the tour scheduling process? So early, I think that both Knock and Funnel were solving kind of that, okay, top of funnel engagement. Now, how do I convert more efficiently? I remember when I met the Knock guys, at the same time, like they were very focused on the tour experience. We were really focused on kind of leading into a lead management experience. Very like simple AI.
No fumbles operation kind of thing.
Correct. 100%. What percentage of your renters will book a tour with zero human interaction? It's shocked folks, right? That like back then, 30% of your renters didn't need a follow-up. If you gave them the automated email with a self-scheduling link, a third of your renters just took care of their own business, right? To your point, you couldn't mess it up. Prior to that, 100% was your leasing agent had to follow up with a guest card and say, hey, Guillermo, I saw you're interested in a 2-bedroom. Would you like to schedule a tour? Like it was really unnecessarily rudimentary. And so just leveraging basic automation technology. The funny thing is, I remember in 2019, our first version of AI, which back then you would call it AI. Today we wouldn't. Today we would just say it was kind of a heuristics-based kind of process. But like the cool, sexy thing we would demo in our first AI product was we could recognize, well, okay, it's 1:00 here in Florida today. I'm going to say good afternoon in my response email, right? Like that was the intelligence available to us, not that it can speak, infinite languages or anything. But to your question, I think what we saw was automation or AI coupled with kind of self-service tour scheduling was our entryway into lead management. And I think one of the things I'm sure that you've heard other guests say that's critical for anybody who views himself as an entrepreneur is you have to stay narrowly focused to start. And then you find the other opportunities. And the big aha for Funnel was in going and selling that kind of automated tour management, lead management workflows. We stumbled into two things. Number one was AI was a much bigger pie than we thought it was, right? So us and Me to Lease and a few others were already working on that problem, and it just kept getting bigger as we, did more and more automated conversations.
The circle got big. The surface area just kept expanding of what was possible.
100%. And that's the thing is you hear a lot of these companies today that claim they're AI native. All the really good AI companies like Palantir, most valuable public, software company in the world right now, they've been working on AI for 10 plus years, right? It's just that the use cases got broader, the technology got better. Like the idea that we'd be able to handle an automated conversation about renewals in 2018 was pretty far-fetched. It was way too complicated. Today, it's kind of a no-brainer that you would throw AI at that. And then the other thing that just opened up that candidly is a good example of you don't need to know everything when you're starting. So we saw this opportunity. And to your point of like, why go there? The problem that I was interested in solving for and why we rebranded to Funnel was that when I was selling Entrata, really great property management software, great single stack solution. But I talked to so many operators who had a pain in the front of the house. And we would say, you have to change the whole house. You got to change, the back office, the accounting software. And that was a limiting function for a lot of people to solve the front office problem. And so what we and others saw was this front office opportunity where we found our niche that we really own, to your point now, is in selling that front office automated solution. Customers told us they had a problem that nobody else could solve. And you've said it before, it was a problem they had tried to solve with other solutions, right? And it was what they told us it was called. A gentleman named Pat Klein, who was the CTO at Essex, he said, Tyler, you guys are the only ones who can do portfolio leasing.
Oh, interesting.
And what we didn't realize at the time, because the way we had built the product in New York, sharing leads across properties was commonplace. I knew from my experience at Entrata and Rainmaker, that wasn't normal. And I actually remember having a conversation with our product leader saying, we're going to have to fix that. It's a bug. You can't do multi-property. You have to do single property. And lo and behold, I was completely wrong. The reality was that there was a subset of customers, real innovators, that saw a need for a singular record across multiple properties. We just so happened to do it out of the box. We've since really optimized for, specialized workflows across multiple assets. But in 2018 and really 2019, we leaned into this concept of centralization. We were the first to say it. We coined and have trademarked the phrase renter-centric. And so from then till now, that's been the biggest kind of to the thesis of the show, the hell yes, is if somebody has tried to centralize and automate on platforms that weren't built for it, they are pulling their hair out. They're frustrated. They can't get the cost savings. We come in, we show them how to do both those things simultaneously. And that's kind of been the key secret ingredient to our success is that, I've tried on my PM software, I've tried on my legacy CRM. I cannot work multiple properties, and I especially can't do that with AI. How can I do it? That's where we find our sweet spot, and really where we've grown into, what we are today, again, approaching 2 million units on the platform.
In 2019, was the leasing experience principally a physical on-site experience? Like you're automating, like I'm just trying to think, like in 2019, if I'm leasing a unit, I'm maybe browsing it online, and then I'm going to go and book a tour and then go to the site, or I'm just going to walk to the site and walk in, and then everything happens there. So what percentage, like again, going back to 19, what percentage of like the scope, like the problem scope was actually digital versus like a physical 9 to 5, I'm walking to the building and I don't need this automated, but or how is that kind of busting at the seams?
Right.
People are like, I got to figure this out because like the 9 to 5 isn't working anymore.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think that, technology begets technology problems, which begets new technology solutions. And the problem
100%.
The problem in 2019 was that ILSs had really been optimized, and obviously there was massive money in them already. And we had transitioned away from a world of I need more leads to a world in which I have too many leads. And so to your question, the majority of consumers were finding their properties digitally. I mean, it was 80+% of leads were not walk-ins. Yeah. And even the ones that were walk-ins, often we'd find when we started sharing leads across properties, they're not even a walk-in. They were at your sister community. They just happened to come to this one as well.
Right.
And so the main problem was, the volume of leads coming to the properties was in many ways genuinely unworkable. And the ILSs were feeding this problem by just handing over too many unqualified leads. And so there was a huge opportunity for tools like Funnel to just step in the middle of that and say, hey, a large percentage of these don't need human follow-up. They're willing to do it on their own. And then what we've seen ever since then is that the percentage that is comfortable self-serving with technology continues to increase, right? And really the fundamental question, and where Funnel continues to try and differentiate ourselves today, is each operator, each asset has a different answer to where do you put the human in the loop, right? Do you put them as part of the tour scheduling process, after the tour scheduling process? Where do you go through and add them to make sure you ensure the highest level of outcomes? And it does depend on property, how comfortable people are. And each one of our operators, and we have clients that, are really extreme in their use of AI, where it's pretty darn difficult to find a human in that process. And then you've got others that are white glove. They want the human involved in everything, and every flavor in between. But so to your question, the problem primarily in 2019 was that lead volumes outpaced the ability to work them in any sort of a manageable, consistent, scalable manner. And one of the biggest things we're proud of is that prior to centralization and funnel and kind of role specialization, the larger operators really had a hard time articulating any sort of economies of scale of how they worked leads, right? Just it didn't matter. I mean, Greystar back then was probably 500,000 units, and every property operated the same no matter what. There was no AI. Yeah. And so it didn't matter that they were big. It still was an inefficient lead management process. What we see now with partners is that they're able to work those multiple properties with AI far more efficiently.
Yeah. Well, and that's the interesting thing about like what we're seeing on the AI side of things is that it's the variability that can really get complicated versus the average rate or whatever your flow rate is, right? It's the fumbles that create the problems. And so how can we begin to insulate ourselves from the fumbles so that we're not dropping the ball, right? And I'm finding the opportunity with AI, particularly as you look at any sort of human operation, is that if you can begin to insulate yourself from the variability, you can start getting predictable about how things are going to happen. And if things are predictable, then you can start optimizing and automating. But otherwise, you're kind of like really vulnerable to the humanness of it all. And that's totally cool. Like there's there's craftsmen that make chairs and there's IKEA, and they serve two totally different markets and two totally different price points.
I like
that's for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And we've probably all bought a craftsman chair and bought IKEA's chairs at one point in time in our life because that's what our gap was. That's the gap we're seeking to close.
Well said. And that's actually, so you mentioned we have our company event in 2 weeks. All of our clients are coming to Scottsdale, Arizona with us. And that is actually kind of my keynote, is that the history of multifamily was so homogenous because you could not blend operating models because it was ran like car dealerships where every single one had to be independent. They all staffed exactly the same, right? In a world in which you have boutique regional players and you have mega managers, you're going to have, and then you layer in AI to your point of how much do you want, self-service and how much do you want human service. You're going to see over the next decade wide variation in customer service levels. I like your IKEA example. I often, kind of point to the hotel model that, under the Marriott brand, there are multiple brands, and there are some that are purely self-service. There's almost nobody there at the hotel to help you. And then there's the Ritz-Carlton, right? And I think that you're going to see multifamily operators begin to gravitate towards different styles. And whether it's, in retail, Walmart has a certain approach, Costco has a certain approach, or furniture, that differentiation, I think, is actually going to serve our customers, which we can talk about which customers, but all of our customers better when it's not just, hey, everybody looks the same. There's no difference between Cortland, Camden, Greystar. I think that in 10 years, they're going to look really different.
Well, and just borrowing on the hospitality theme there, like I'm finding that hospitality has almost gone too far from a micro brand perspective. Like Marriott is a great example of like, now they've got just so many different brands. I just want to stay at a hotel, or, I just want to have I want to know what I'm getting into. I don't want to sort of poke around all these different brands, but we're a long ways away from that. You brought up a good segue, and thanks for this. It's like, you have a unique perspective in that your customer has evolved. Your prospect would have evolved from 2019 through to where we are today, and who's buying and what the problems that they're solving and the problems you're able to solve, that has evolved from here today. So I'm curious, and I was asking you about this in the preamble around like this concept of your customer's customer. And I heard this first years back. I think it was one of the old ex-SAP CEO was going to ServiceNow. And at the time he talked about the customer's customer, and he's kind of digging in on that. And it's intentionally like a mind frame break using the language like that. But like when I think of customer's customer, particularly in the hell yes conversation, when just having chats about it last night, and again, in my discovery of how people make decisions in multifamily property management, where do you see, how do you stratify the types of customers that you have? And not just by firmographics, but like the types of buyers. And, sometimes I say like fee managers or owner operators or REITs or SFR, BTR, whatever, right? How do you begin to stratify it? And then in your opinion or your experience, how do you identify the customer's customer and what they're seeking to solve? Like, how do you double click on that? And where have you seen, so double click on that, where have you seen it to be different? Where it's on the outside, they all look the same, but even like Greystar owned assets runs differently than Greystar.
Correct. And then within their managed portfolio, there's different approaches. So wonderful question. And I think that if you've got an audience of multifamily vendors and or operators, I think these are things you need to ask yourself. And in fact, because it plays back the other way as well. Like you need to ask, who's my vendor's customer, right? Like, are they a publicly traded company like AppFolio? Their customer is the public markets, right? If they're PE, VC backed, private, right? All the rest. But, first and foremost, I will say there's different answers to it. Let me give you a macro answer first. That is, as a company leader, we care most about our mission statement is that we want to create the world's greatest rentals experience, right? Renter experience, rentals experience. And you could argue that, and I mentioned earlier, we own this trademark renter-centric. You could make an argument that would be overly simplistic to say, well, then of course at Funnel, every decision is about the renter. And that's not true. Because our real, the sub bullet point to the, creating the world's great renters experience is enabling our clients, property management companies, to deploy this new operating model, to deploy automation, deploy centralization. So let me bring it back to kind of the first principles part of your question, which is I go back to 2019, 2020, when Funnel's getting started, just getting going. A mistake that a lot of startups make is they try and make everybody happy at once, right? And so their customer is a multifamily property management company, and that's like 20 different flavors, and that's a problem. You can't make 20 different types of pizza all at once. Like pick your slice, right? And in many cases, you probably shouldn't pick cheese. Like you need to pick one that's like specialized. So for Funnel, we were fortunate. Our specialist customer was REITs. And the cousin of REIT is a large owner operator. So to your point, not a third party manager, which we'll get to. I'll talk about kind of that transition that Funnel now, has.
Well, you eventually have to, right?
You eventually have to. But the REITs think differently. And to your point, it's because who's their customer? And like I said about AppFolio, the REIT's customer is the public market. right? And if I'm the CTO, it's the CEO who reports to the board, who reports to the public markets.
So you got to think like that. CEO's who's he got to report to? What's
Correct.
his annual report, monthly report look like, and who's it towards?
And in fact, they have different metrics than other operators, right? So you won't hear most third-party managers talk about FFO. FFO is funds from operations. And by the way, that was when I learned what that term meant, and it allowed me to really think about our marketing and our sales proposition, and frankly, understand why we're such a good fit for the REITs, which is unlike the kind of merchant, maybe I would put merchant builder on the far end of the extreme from REITs, because REITs, think about FFO, that literally means they care infinitely about how well the property operates, right? Versus if you're a merchant builder, all you care is the flip. And in many cases, they do stupid things like they, do these concessions and they have all their leases expiring at the same time because they're just trying to lease it. They're just trying to resell the property, right?
80% of 100%, or 100% of 80% of 100% for a merchant builder is a good thing.
Yeah, they don't care, right?
They want to package it up, bow it up, get it off their hands and build again. Their whole balance sheet, their debt structure, it's completely structured to enable a construction, a flip. They've got different LPs. They have different LPs for every single building, so they can box up the liability, right? Even if they sell it to themselves as an operator, it's a different company.
Yeah. And I think that mindset was the one that I actually first understood multifamily to be, because my first multifamily job, I was interning for Wasatch Property Management. They're a developer. To your point, they'd often sell the properties to themselves. And so you just don't think really deeply operationally. You think more like sales. You're to your point, you're loading up the cruise boat. And as long as it's, 80 to 90% full, you live with it, because, it's not about 6 months from now, does an investment I'm making today yield some ROI? And that ROI not being an asset sale, but ROI being that I run more efficiently, right? I can charge more in rents, or I can run more efficiently. And so just, to the point of your question, really understanding our first buyer, which was who does FFO matter to, which is REITs and large owner operators. So Cortland falls in that bucket. Morgan falls in that bucket. Those guys got Funnel because when we would go in and tell them, hey, with our model, you can genuinely, not like hyperbole or in the future with AI, but like today, restaff your buildings and improve your employee to unit ratio. And here's the playbook on how. So you mentioned, the OpTech. We've kind of leaned into the sports theme at Funnel because we have a playbook. It was Centralization playbook. We rolled it out 5 years ago that says this is how you can run without assistant community managers, which, again, 10 years ago would have been completely unheard of. Today, it's a genuinely proven viable model. Camden does it. And Camden attributed $4 million of annualized savings, which shows up in FFO, from their work reimagined, where they went from every property has an ACM to all my properties are in pods, or what they call nests. So, to answer your question directly, you do need to understand who that customer is. You need to double down on that. And early on, because you want them to have struggled and used another solution, right? They're going to have used their PM software to try this. If you can make that customer's customer, and this is the great thing about REITs, there's not many of them. We have 4 of the 6 big REITs on Funnel. They talk about it on their earnings calls, and they will say, hey, this thing saved me money, and I want you to be aware of it. And then that created momentum for Funnel, where we could say, hey, we think this model will work for others. But then again, going to the second part of the question, we had to evolve over time that story, because the customer's customer changed and continues to change all the time.
Yeah. Well, I find it interesting, and for those listening that are starting a company or even in the growth stage of it, like to your couple of your compounding points here, right? About staying focused, finding a niche, and understanding that customer's customer. That's a multivariate kind of like combination of things that you got to kind of commit to. If you start dancing around with one of those variables, you're going to end up spending, even as a salesperson, now you're writing 3 different decks. You've got 3 different storylines, or alternatively, you're completely missing them. They're missing the mark. You're not even speaking to what they care about.
100%. I am fortunate. I'm still involved running our sales organization, and we've made plenty of mistakes ourselves, and usually it's around that kind of problem of we're swinging too wide. We're not focused on our ICP, and we're not doubling down. And where Funnel has been fortunate is that we've been a good grower the last couple of years. We grew 80% last year. In many ways, it's just taking what the next step. Right. And so an example to kind of on this topic of your customer's customer, we start with REITs and owner operators. Our first fee managers were hybrid. So BH is one of those who they own about 50,000 units and they third party manage about 50,000 units. And so the value proposition was clear to them on the half. And then they said, well, we think we'll help you sell the value proposition on the other half. And so they've been a great development partner for us. They created this thing called the Mint Experience. They sell it as a value add to their client, right? So now their customer is our customer, and they bring us in to go meet with their customers. And then they taught us, to your point on kind of like staying focused, we had to, once we had really kind of solved for, as a fun story this last year, we rolled out UDR, and UDR is a really, really good operator. And it was one of our easiest implementations ever because we had mostly solved the problems that they had, right? We had done large scale owner operator implementations for 4 or 5 years. And so there was very little net new stuff we needed to build for them. By comparison, poor BH had to teach us a lot, right? They had to teach us, how do you put up segments between ownership groups, right? Because maybe customer A doesn't want their data shared with customer B and Funnel's view does. So you need to build this, right? And you need to think about, we had to build a BTR functionality with them, right? And just learn bit by bit. And now we just announced, ZRS rolled out Funnel, 100,000 unit fee manager.
For you guys.
Yeah,
awesome.
we're very fortunate to be near the majority of Greystar's properties as their CRM. So as a company that started REIT focused, and we're by no means done or perfect on this yet, but we've come a long way to be able to have various value propositions. But I will say again, and the fee managers in particular, their world changes constantly, because in 22, 23, when rents were growing as a third party manager or a REIT, times were good. I could be a little more aggressive. And so the value proposition of why Funnel was different, than it is today, where like a lot of our early third party managers bought Funnel because they wanted to centralize like the REITs. Well, right now owners are like, don't mess with my property, just focus. And we want AI. So most of our new third party deployments are about AI. Now we've always deployed both, but what we're emphasizing, what we're focused on has changed pretty significantly. And all that really changed, the product didn't change that much, the market changed. And my crazy prediction, Guillermo, is that in 2 years, we're gonna go right back where the third party managers are gonna say, okay, we're using all the AI. We all have voice AI, we have resident AI. We've tried all the solutions. We've tried the PM softwares, we've tried the standalones. Now I need to go and get a centralized model again, right? Like it's gonna come back, because in particular, these third party managers are so big, they stand to gain a ton from moving to a centralized operating model, and they're all inching their way towards it.
Well, and what's interesting about the centralized operating model is that it gives you a chance to have oversight on the quality of the data that is coming into your system. I mean, it's not a secret that if your data isn't codified or organized or indexed or mapped, your probability of using AI successfully is going to be variable at best. And so, like when you do centralize, you do commit to documenting an SOP for a specific process. And then that's going to come with enhanced data fields, all those kind of things. You're able to scrum as a group and say, hey, we're all specialists here. As a specialist, how do you find this function working? Whereas when you're generalist, you just kind of make it work, or maybe you skip a step. And that doesn't 100%. Happen when you're doing a centralized entity. And so you're able to kind of like tune the pistons and the fuel injectors and all those different parts so that the engine can run smoothly. Otherwise, you're just kind of like rolling down the hill. And
100%.
And it's an interesting kind of, I think what's interesting about centralization right now, and I was having this conversation last night, is that, in my opinion, like from the leasing side, because it's largely digital or it's digitable, more so than like maintenance and operations. Maintenance and operations is still stuck because there's still people that have whiteboards on the wall with sticky notes on it. Or literally, I was talking to one operator, and if there's a red sticky on the door, it needs to be turned. And if there's a green sticky on the door, it's done.
Yeah.
Like there's no AI there. How do we use AI? They're trying to fire up a claw bot. And I'm like, no, you've got some bigger problems you're going to solve, like in terms of how you're going to manage these operations, because you can't get to where you want to be.
And that's good. I mean, to your point, I've said this a lot. You mentioned our podcast and the content we put out. My biggest drum I'm beating right now, that third-party managers, by and large, are having trouble convincing their clients of, because again, their client, I love this thing you've picked up on, their clients changed, right? When rents were growing 20% year over year, they weren't complaining. They were just worried about changing deals and swapping cash out on this one to that one. They are ruthless right now on their third-party managers, and unfortunately, many of them have fallen into the exact conundrum that you just articulated, which they've heard about this cool AI, which is cool, and then they think that's the solution, and they throw it at it. And not only are AI pilots and experiments, generally speaking, difficult to get ROI out of, like you really need to be focused. They're going to fail if you don't have an SOP, like there's nothing to automate. And in
Yeah.
particular, you haven't aggregated the work, right? Like at Funnel, if I went to one of my support reps and said, hey, you only manage my clients in Florida. And then I said, okay, well, now I'm going to give you this AI tool and it's going to, help you answer 20% of your questions. What does that do, right? Like maybe it's a useful tool, maybe I should do it. But if I go to my entire support organization that is specialized on, this is my online leasing support team, and they manage customers nationally, and we get, 10,000 support tickets in a period, and now we can automate 20% of those. Whoa, I probably don't need to make the next hire, right? Yeah. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now, is that there is a lot of frustration from those who have deployed AI but didn't centralize, and they're looking at AI like it's the problem. And the problem is their operating model. They have not aggregated and to your point, documented the work. Where on the flip side, our partners that have centralized, they have real ROI. Like they are genuinely able to say, hey, I used to have to run my contact center, and keep in mind, contact centers have constant employee churn, right? So I used to have to hire 20 new people a year for my contact center. I haven't had to hire any for 6 months because I'm just automating the extra work away. But that's only because they've aggregated the work and documented and specialized, to your point. So that's a moment in time.
And probably not why they bought.
Correct.
Like I'm finding really interesting is that the why they buy and why they stay are two different things now.
Yeah.
It's like that why they buy, that can probably have something to do with their customer's customer. But then like this is the whole like speed, cost, and quality, right? Mm-hmm. So you can make it faster, you can make it better, or you can do it cheaper. And they may they may get interested because of speed, and then they may get the deal across the line because of cost, but then they stay because of quality.
Right. Well, and I think
all of a sudden life got easier.
100%. And I think for us as entrepreneurs and as operators of technology platforms, that is, I said it myself, like a lot of third-party managers originally bought Funnel for centralization. And right now they don't have the political capital to do that. Their asset management clients are not comfortable with them moving people off site today, right? Yeah. And so we therefore as Funnel have to be able to make sure we're articulating the value on multiple fronts, right? And that inclusive of, hey, here's the AI value of our platform. And so you're right, why somebody buys, why they stay are very different problems. But I do think similar to what you kind of led, this is the entrepreneurial journey that I've been on. When you're just trying to get first customers, you get zero benefit of the doubt. Like nobody is going to say, sure, we're going to move my portfolio onto this unproven technology. And so you really have to, I love nature documentaries. You're living off other people's scraps, like the lion's going to eat first. You're just like, man, I hope they don't finish that. Right. So it's like early on, Funnel wouldn't have existed if the big PM softwares figured out centralization and AI. There would be no reason for Funnel. We're only here because they haven't, right? No, but that doesn't mean they won't eventually, right? Someday the big PM softwares may have good tools. And so therefore we have to be evolving and building that value proposition, to your point, with the existing customers, because now they don't want to switch, but they're going to want us to be best in class as well.
Yeah, I think that two things are going to happen at the same time. Like you're going to, the PMSs are going to figure out what they're best in the world at. And so they're going to kind of consolidate their scope of function. And that's going to be, let's call it the balance sheet side. I like to make it very simple, the balance sheet side. They're going to be really good, best in the world at balance sheet management. And so that's accounts receivable, payable, all that kind of stuff. And that side of it is going to, the way that they operate is going to include more AI, but the systems of engagement, top of funnel, the stuff that's resident facing and touching, that's going to have to be very volatile. It's going to be stuff you can plug in, plug in, pull out, and that kind of thing, so you can experiment, because ultimately there are things in a business that should be stable and robust, and there are things that have to be dynamic. Yeah. And so it's this two-speed model that there's fast and slow at the same time, and you got to think that way. If you think that the thing that's slow is going to be fast, you're wrong. If you think the thing that's fast is going to be slow, you're also wrong. Yeah. And so you have to architect it so that it can work like a big cog and a small cog, and it has to work that way. Yeah. Or like a better example is probably a clutch. Like you got to have a flywheel that spins that you can engage and then pop into different gears. And you've got to be able to do that intentionally. And in our world, they've got to be able to coexist at the same time.
100%. And I think that's where, Funnel today, like to my point earlier, for the installed units on our platform, we do get the benefit of the doubt, right? And so one of our best metrics, for instance, is our net revenue retention, 160% net revenue retention. Customers stay on Funnel and they buy more products from Funnel, but that is not our God-given right. We have to go back and rethink, the lead management workflows we built in 2019 are probably similarly outdated to the ones that, were created in 2012 that I was making fun of earlier. And so we're constantly challenging ourselves, hey, how do we live in a ChatGPT world, right? Because if we don't, to your point, and we don't make that transition over time, there'll be some other point of system of action that comes in and pushes us to just being a system of record.
Yep.
And what's dynamic about this moment in time is that I like how you articulated it. Everybody has to be moving fast and slow, and you don't know which slow moving parts are going to end up being insanely valuable. So one of the bets that I'm making is I don't believe the PM softwares are going to die by any means. I think that they are going to play an incredibly important part. And you said the same, but where we need to live is that we need to be as interoperable as we possibly can with them. And so, we are very intentional at playing by the rules. We are very intentional at working as tightly as we can with them, complementing their systems, making them more valuable in a lot of ways, because we think that benefits both of us in a world that's going to be rapidly evolving. And of course, to your point, we still simultaneously, we get integration requests on a weekly basis from a customer who finds a cool little, hey, there's this AI bot that I came up with that does this crazy, it's literally one of our customers has a, Claude coded thing that they want us to plug in. And it's like, okay, we got to figure out how to do that while simultaneously moving slowly with the PM softwares towards even better interoperability. But if you're not excited about the lack of certainty, you shouldn't be building right now. But if it enthralls you, then it's a wonderful time to be an entrepreneur.
I think what's really interesting right now is that product roadmaps are changing as the end user tools are becoming more evolved. And I'll use an example, like reporting interfaces now. You can spin dev cycles on building reporting looks and feels and filters and all those things. But as we take a look at what the customer is looking to use, they're looking to use Claude. And I just spun up for a friend of mine, a native AI CRM called Clarify. And just to get a sense of what it feels like to be inside a CRM. This is not real estate, it's just a general CRM. And just feel what it looks like. And what was interesting about it is that the way that a native AI app works, I could not have defined it in my imagination, because it does operate differently. It makes conclusions. It thinks of fields. It just thinks of things differently. And that thing, from a native AI perspective, one thing that they openly chatted about is that their reporting roadmap looks a lot like connecting data to Claude and not a lot like building screens.
Correct.
And so their roadmap has changed. And I'm talking to my team and saying, hey, we want our roadmap. Like, the users are pulling from Claude or for Claude. Like, let's think about that before we start investing more in PDF generation, all those kind of things.
Well said. And then that's the exact example. I mean, we as a CRM are going workflow by workflow and thinking and been doing this for many years. So for instance, when we started, no one had outbound call dialing. Now that's table stakes. Well, I shouldn't say table stakes. For us, it's table stakes. Anybody who's building a CRM would have outbound call dialing, and then we were the first to do transcription. Transcription was only kind of valuable. Transcription summaries, super valuable, right? Yeah. And then you start to say, okay, well, now I need to take action items out of those calls. I need to find insights in those calls, right? And so to your point, you're constantly, it's a moving target. But if you sit and say, well, the version I built in 2020 is good enough, you're going to lose. You have to be replacing yourself. And so in many ways, as an example, the first version of our call system, the client wanted us to have a module where when the call ended, the leasing associate had to type in notes. This was a required field that they wanted. And like today, that is just literally pointless, right? Like the AI is going to do a much better job of, now you can still, we have the ability to turn that button on, but 99% of our customers just want the AI to do the summary, right? We'll put the notes on there, create the action item for me, give me the sentiment from that call. And I love the example you gave. Reporting's the same. And I will say as somebody who spent their whole career in selling software platforms, I'm here for it on reporting, because when I came into the world of software, BI was the buzz, right? Kind of 2012 to 2015, everyone had a BI tool, and none of them lived up to the promise, right? Because reporting as a static concept is just kind of dumb. Like as a CEO, I don't want to look at the same reports usually. Like there's a couple, but I mostly want to be able to just ask a question. And so we similarly are going through all of the legwork to be able to make our data queryable, conversational, right? Because that's the future. But and once again, there's no financial incentive to do that today. Nobody's canceling Funnel or not buying Funnel because we don't have that, because nobody has it. But if we don't do it, when that does become table stakes and we're a year or two behind, then you open the door for an opportunity for somebody else to come in. So it's the innovator's dilemma is real.
It's going to be an evaluation criteria is, what are your connectors? What's your connector, roadmap plan established?
Yeah, Q4, we brought back in our founding CTO who works for us pretty much full time, but he just doesn't want to be the day job anymore to stand up our MCP server. Because everything else was impossible until that was done. And then once that's done, now we can do these other projects. But yeah, similarly, there's a lot of cool demoable stuff, but it's very, to your point, everyone thinks they can build a Claude bot and like, oh, look, I can build this thing. Making it work at scale, where again, Funnel's approaching 2 million units on the platform and cannot be down more than 0.001% of the time. Like making it work at scale is really difficult. And so that's the challenge where you've got to go back to kind of first principles and say, well, you can't just throw a conversational bot at this, it'll slow the whole thing down. You got to do some real genuine dev work to make sure these things work at the scale you need them to.
Yep. When you guys were going from just kind of back to when you guys are going from different customer sets, like the REITs to the big, larger owner operators to NEP to BH, did you intentionally say we're going to go target that segment, or did you get pulled into that segment?
Yeah, I think it's more pull than push. There's every entrepreneur in your journey, every investor you ever talk to is going to push you, right? And they're going to say, why don't you go after this? Why don't you go after that? And I always, I'm naturally curious as a salesperson. I want to know what other verticals are doing. And so, and in fact, not for this isn't a political commentary, but a really great thinker, really great book, 0 to 1, written by Peter Thiel. He talks about, what are the secrets in the world that what's the business no one's building? And what are kind of obvious secrets that everybody's convinced of the wrong thing? And you have to challenge your own thinking, because I've found sometimes that I give into groupthink. I'm like, oh, we shouldn't do that. That's a bad idea. And so you need to be open to new verticals, new customer segments, and not write anything off. Because sometimes they'll surprise you. Like BTR is not SFR. It was a small step for us. We looked long and hard and have had many, many opportunities to go into SFR. And in all but one case, we've said no, because it was going to be one of those, 80% of the product works for it, but the 20% is going to cause my dev team to take 80% of their work to rebuild it.
How much your sales cycles, right? I mean, all of a sudden you're committing a sales organization, a message organization, a marketing organization. There's a lot of lift there too, right?
Yeah,
and being able to appeal to the customer's customer again, right?
100%. And you shouldn't, in my previous company, the CEO used to say, if we're going to do something, we want to be 10x better than anybody else. And it's easy to say, it's hard to do. And you find when you don't do it, life sucks. Like when you're building products that are not great and you're just a Me Too product, that's not fun. Like nobody wants to be the second or third best at something. And so it does take time, and we're not perfect at it either, but to try and keep the discipline of, we can genuinely hold our heads high and say, we do this extremely well. We're the best at it. And then to your point though, so the pull happens where, like I said, REITs got these great results, sold owner operators sold hybrid owner fee managers. Those fee managers sold pure fee managers. Those fee managers are now taking us into additional markets like BTR and international markets.
Well, this is what we're finding is we're getting pull, the kind of natural turnover in the staff turnover in the business creates pull for us, because they'll go from one customer to another customer and then just say, hey, we need ours.
That's one of those flywheel things that, again, early on, and you don't get that advantage, but because it used to suck. Like when you'd have somebody leave, they were your advocate. You're like, well, there goes my champion, and I have to sell the new person. We're finally at a place where that works in our favor as well. Where it's like, we've got, I think 2 or 3 deals in the sales pipeline right now where they're executives from a current customer that went to a smaller company. And it's like, oh, that's a slam dunk. They already know the funnel. They know it works. So you're right.
We've got a case study with their name on it, right, for another customer.
And to your point, those are also the ones that usually try and pull us into new verticals. Like we had a call yesterday with an executive who left one of our biggest customers, and it's way outside of our strike zone. But I took it because I was like, hey, you know what you're talking about. If you think it's valuable, I'll look at it, right? And then, like I said, you have to go back and question yourself. But that's where the fun entrepreneurial side is. You got to mentally experiment with these things, but you can't run too many experiments at once. So
I
we've
think
run
you
a
gotta
few that we've had to pull
I think
back
you got
on.
to approach those as I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I've got to be somewhat skeptical this is going to be successful for these
Correct. And
reasons.
it's
Convince me otherwise.
Yeah. And like I said, I mean, we were very skeptical of student. It's been a slam dunk for us. Student's been awesome. Like our student customers are super happy. And I was having gone through student at Entrada, and Entrada built student like from the ground up. And it's a very good product. I was really skeptical, but inherently some of the things that make Funnel special, like our renter centralization, work super well in student. And also student demographic, of course, is very AI friendly. And so like student's been a slam dunk for Funnel. SFR is again one of those ones that we've said no to, because every time we've dipped our toe in the water, we know it's going to be work. And then on the flip side, so there's one big SFR customer that we said, yes, we'll do it because you're big enough. And then it just so happened that the ground kind of fell out right now politically on SFR.
Yeah, it's tough.
So we were kind of lucky in that regard. But I think as companies grow, it is tempting to move into multiple verticals. And it's a combination, not only verticals, but even worse, I will say, than verticals. Because if you can, doing experimentation on new customer segments is easier to pull back because the sunk cost isn't that great, right? If it's like, hey, we tried doing, international market, or we tried doing SFR and it just didn't work. And that was kind of like our approach to SFR. This big operator came to us, we're like, let's turn it on and see what breaks before I build you anything. When you go into new verticals or new products where you're saying, hey, we're going to do, different industry, or we're going to build a maintenance product, you can't pull back on that. Like that is a year's worth plus of dev work. And then that sunk cost starts to just like, and we saw it, there's certain companies, but like we built things at other companies where it took 4 or 5 years, never got any traction. And you look in hindsight, you're like, man, if we would have put those dev resources towards what we were good at, how much better would we have been?
Well, I think it's kind of in this conversation is just the concept of that you can, it could be easier to go to, this is the whole, like, I think it's the Boston Consulting, like innovation matrix, where you've got like products and you got products and then customers markets. It's kind of like the 2x2. And it's like, you got to pick you can't go from here to here. You got to go here and over, or here and over, but you cannot go this way. That is the death zone. Right. And so you can go new customers, or you can go new products to the same customers, or you can go new market, same customers. And it's
that's exactly right. Yeah. You know it better than I am. I'm going to go Google this chart right now, because that's exactly when you try to, and candidly, like I'll just talk, I think it's good to be like transparent. So I'm wearing this shirt today, got Funnel in Phoenix, right? And so last year we did our first acquisition, wildly successful for us, but we also made a lot of mistakes, right? And so where the biggest successes have been is, number one, it's the same customers, new products, right? And so Phoenix is the rebranded product of LeaseHawk, right? And a lot of those LeaseHawk customers under the Phoenix brand have moved to the Funnel product, right? Which we're really good at selling, right? Or there's a lot of Funnel customers that we've sold Phoenix, and in particular, we have an AI Insights product, and they love it, right? What we kind of found is when we went out and said, well, let's try and scale this new product to us to a new set of customers, that was just pushing a rock uphill. And in particular, because the market's evolving towards, as we were discussing earlier, they want these interconnected platforms. And so, that was very investor like, hey, you guys should go after this market. And it's like, that's kind of a new customer set for us with kind of a new product set, versus to your point, hey, let's take this product to our existing customers. That's a slam dunk, right? Yeah,
it's just so much less risk to it. Like that, then you're moving that other 2x2 of like complexity and cost, right? So what's the probability of this, or effort and complexity? Like what's the possible? Is that high effort, high cost, or high effort, high result, or is it going to be a low effort, high result? And so how can we begin to move towards those kind of like opportunities? And that's going to align with your same customers, same markets, not new customers, new markets.
And this is where it gets super tricky though, Guillermo, because to your point, that determination is everything. Because there have been times at Funnel, we've done experiments that I've had to go and really convince the team and say, guys, like, I know this doesn't look attractive. Let me help you understand the strategy of it's a high effort and at first low value or low result type effort, but here's why it's so important for us out into the future, right? And so, for example, standing up the MCP server and being the first company to process rent via ChatGPT. Today, there are not hundreds of thousands of residents demanding that functionality, right?
But I think what's interesting, but how you frame that though, right? You actually frame that as a hypothesis statement more so than as a go-to-market.
Correct.
So it was like, we're framing this to
Bet.
discover and to learn, not to go to market, because we
Correct.
don't know yet. We're going to invest in that hypothesis statement. It's very scientific. It's scientific method, right?
It is.
And so
And
like
to your point, I like Jeff Bezos talks about these things as like, is it a one-way door or two-way door? And in this case, it's a one-way door to do that work. Like, you're not going to throw it away, but it's one that opens up a world of possibilities, and they don't need to all be there. But you're right. And that's similar to the way you were articulating kind of the 2x2 as well. There are things that are simply TAM based of, if this is true, it opens up a big new TAM for us, and therefore we're going to do it. And then there's others that are just kind of hand to mouth. Clearly, if this works, like we did to get through COVID, when we were kind of just barely getting our feet under us, we did a partnership with the PM software where they resold our CRM. And it was ironically immediately successful and valuable in that period of time. And then within 2 years, something we had to throw away. And I would do it all over again because it was valuable for the short period of time. And then we've done other projects where almost zero value, like we built a proprietary lease management platform because some of our early customers didn't use Blue Moon. And it was a ton of work. And early on, it only, 2 customers used it. But now it allows Funnel to do so many things, right? Because we're not dependent on only working within a certain framework. So it's constant decision making. And I will say, for any entrepreneur, and especially if you're a salesperson, you need to care about your product. You need to care about the industry. And then you need to, most importantly, surround yourself at your company with smart people. That can be sales engineer, the product managers. For me as the CEO, it's my chief product officer, right? And my customers, because I've got my sales point of view, and I'm naturally always going to orient back towards, well, what's the thing that helps me close the deal or that helps me?
Yeah.
But sometimes, going and selling a giant SFR deal would be, the board would love it because it's like, hey, let me put up this big number on the board. But we learned the hard way at Funnel, like, just because you can sell something doesn't mean you should, right? And so having the customer and the product team right here next to you saying, here's why I don't want to do that, and debating, do they come to your side and say, you know what, I get it, it's going to be worth it, it's a bet that we're going to make.
This is kind of thing like where I'm hopeful that we're going to see more of a friendly playground from a PMS perspective, because I feel that, well, I know from my personal experience, when we start creating integrations, then it becomes very clear where our product stops and where the other product starts. Yeah. And so I don't get tempted to go get into invoicing, because that is what they do. That is not what we do. We're going to enable it. And so that's what I'm finding to be, I'm hopeful that that's going to emerge, because not everyone's going to feel pressured to build mini PMSs that replicate work that PMSs could be doing or should be doing, because I need to kind of like feather in my scope. I'm hopeful.
No, I completely agree. And again, I come with the background of, I was at a PM software that at the time I thought was super open. And in hindsight, I realized, to your point, it was pretty clear where we were and we're not comfortable with others playing. And that's fine, right? To your point, like Appfolio for a decade was closed, and now they are, intentional about opening up in certain places, not others. And I think that you're right. Go back to our earlier part of the conversation. AI is going to force that more so, because there will be infinite use cases imaginable for AI tools, right? Yeah. And I think the PM softwares are correctly, and frankly, Funnel's had some stuff on LinkedIn lately about integrations. I think you articulated perfectly well a little bit of naivete on my part of, the beauty of the RealPage, Yardi, Resman, Entrata integration agreements is they spell out the rules of the road. And there's no misunderstandings of, like, if I go and I, try and work around the PMS's rules of the road, they can rightfully slap my hand and say, we're going to take away your access, right? Yep. Often as startups, we just kind of throw our APIs around. And unfortunately, this happened to me when I was at Entrata, and they had the whole lawsuit with Yardi. We currently are working through with another vendor, kind of an integration misunderstanding. And I wish in hindsight, I would have from the beginning said, we are a totally open company. We have integration agreements, and this is our rules of the road. These are the things that we want to support, the things that don't make sense for us to support. And now we're having to put those in place, and for 99% of people, they're fine.
I think it's a successful lesson that's out there, because it had to happen. I mean, I think ultimately this whole interoperability around data has become like, there's a lot of, I would say that we were pushing on it. Like, I look at the RETC data model as an example. Like, I kind of dug deep with the Cherry guys as to why does this even exist? This seems like a lot of work and doesn't seem like what you guys should do. Why did someone do this? And it came because of a legislation thing. And I was like, okay, now that makes sense. I get it. There was an external forcing function that forced the industry to create this data model that was consistent for everybody. I got it. That explains also why there's nothing for the banking side, and that explains why there's nothing for the maintenance side or operations side, because there's no forcing function.
No, and by the way, just to plug really quick, the RETC has been, I was skeptical of it being valuable as well. When all the fee transparency stuff came down that we had to sprint on for our partners, it's nice to have a framework that you can work within. And again, I will also say, if you combine, there's going to be some stuff that is legislatively important. And I think we're going to see that in revenue management, fee transparency. That's good to have guardrails for all of our protection and to have fair rules of the road for the PMCs. BH wants to play by the same rules as ZRS, right? They don't want to have, well, you're showing this and I'm not. But then I actually, again, and this is where, like myself and the CEO of RealPage, been simpatico on LinkedIn about, is commercial agreements have their place. And part of it is recognizing, as you said, look, if Yardi is willing to expose their ledger to me, that's amazing. But if they also don't want me touching the status, that's also okay, right? And I have to make my system work within that. I have to set customer expectations within that. And so I think that I share your optimism that we're headed in a direction of clarity, expectation setting, and then, working within that. And because there's enough competition in this industry, it's not like one PM software has 80% market share. There will always be a variety, right? And so if one company wants to expose an API and it's important to PMCs, well, maybe they'll switch to the one that exposes it, right? I can say this, if I want to use Built, I'm not buying Entrata, right? Because they don't integrate with Built, and they have every right to not integrate with Built, but that rewards Yardi for offering that API. And I think to your point, that if we can be more transparent about that, and Yardi says, hey, I'll let you do this Built, but I won't let you do that, then there's a win-win there and customers get optionality.
Well, then you start seeing dance partners emerge, right?
Yes.
And those dance partners start to kind of make things more efficient, because then reveal things to one another that is confidential, strategic, whatever. And then they can kind of work and operate. And you see that in, device manufacturing, right? Samsung makes a lot of the stuff that's inside an Apple phone, right?
Yeah.
And they're good with that. And that's how it works. And Corning makes the glass for both. These things happen in other environments wholesomely. Talk about any German automobile, Bosch makes the fuel pump for everybody, right? Yeah. BMW, Porsche, doesn't matter, right? They make them for everybody. So it's it just happens that way. I know we're kind of come close to time here. I got a couple more questions I want to just ask you about, given your experience. So again, recent conversations, and I'm curious to get your point is your perspective on how do you manage the customer? How do you manage the customer conversation when you're not in the room? When I'm meaning about your customers doing the internal selling on your behalf, how do you influence that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to what you were saying at the outset, what your show is called. You need to get to hell yes. And you've got to have an incredibly clear value proposition with stakeholder that matters. I mean, none of this is rocket science, but I think it also is a bit of, I have found in Funnel's growth that often partners don't choose us first because we look hard. We're an outside new vendor and there's a lot of change management. And usually the advocates are built through failed experimentations of other tools. And you 100%. Just have to build the rapport with them. And once they're candid with you that, hey, I've tried this other thing and therefore I'm aligned with, so let's say that somebody tries the new PM software CRM that's promised to solve all their problems and it doesn't. And if I develop trust with them of, hey, look, that's okay. I'm not mad at you. You tried that. Here's what other customers have learned. Let me help educate you, because that you're still, even after failed experimentations, let's say I'm working with a COO, his CTO may still be on PM software team. The CTO may say, let's give it a second try. And in that case, you're going to find that the COO is kind of asking me for coaching. And this happens all the time. They're going to call and say, hey, what have you seen? Why shouldn't we experiment with that again? Why was this other customer you had so successful? And ultimately, I mean, I think to your point, it's why we spend a ton of time on thought leadership, our forum, we get people talking, because nobody buys Funnel because of my pitch. You can be the world's best salesperson, you can be the best storyteller, but they need customer stories. Other than your first customer, that's the hardest. But once you have the story, then you're just making it safer for them. So if anybody hasn't read Crossing the Chasm, they need to, right?
They have
people have to be surrounded in their buying universe with other operators that can validate the decision. And then it's our job to facilitate those interactions so that, after our forum, when prospective customer B goes back to Atlanta and they're telling their CTO they got to do this, and the CTO says, well, how do you know it's going to work? And they say, well, not only here's the data that Funnel provided to me, but maybe it's biased, sure. But I talked to these 3 other customers who validated it. right? And I can call them, they're going to guide me through it. So I guess my best advice would be build a community.
And one thing that people fail to observe in the metaphor of the bowling pin strategy and crossing the chasm is that the bowling pins all look alike, for one, and the bowling pins are clustered together in a network.
Yeah.
So the energy that goes into knocking down that first pin can be transferred within the network to like-shaped pins.
Yeah.
If they're all different shapes and they're all distributed, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And that's an often overlooked part of that metaphor, is that the market has to be homogeneous, and they've got to be near to one another so that they can refer to each other with trust. Which
is why, going back to the point earlier, you have to be focused on a single space first, win that niche. It's why Funnel has 4 REITs. It's not that, they magically all had different value propositions. No, they watch what each other do, right? Essex coming on Funnel helped MAA feel comfortable, helped UDR feel comfortable, right? Like helped Camden feel comfortable. So it's, I got my order wrong. Camden was earlier in that, but you get the point.
Yeah, I got you. Let's not forget about Forum, but couple questions. When you look back at your career and your journey, let's go back to, your first starting point. What's the bit of advice you'd give yourself to make your life that would have made your life a whole lot easier to where you've gotten to today?
I probably need to constantly give myself this advice, but just to stay humble and know that there's something you should be learning at every stage of your career. Every time you kind of think you've made it, you get a gut punch on some big thing you weren't expecting. And so I think that in particular, early in my career, I think I learned the lessons later, which maybe that's natural. Maybe that always happens. But in particular, like, I think I'd like to continue learning faster. Like I want to learn with my customers faster. I want to not have to make the same mistake twice. And tied into that, of course, I give this advice to all of our employees and especially all of our salespeople, is that most importantly is to understand your customer's business, which is what you've been articulating. And so I've never ran a multifamily portfolio, but I get to consult with the largest operators in America and Canada on how to operate their portfolios. And that's just through osmosis and learning and studying. And, it's like living in a foreign country and being perceived as somebody who was naturally born. Like I consider myself a multifamily person, even though I've never run multifamily. So be humble enough to learn that, to learn the language and not, think that your way of thinking, everyone else needs to think.
Yeah, I love it. And that puts you in a position of curiosity versus authority, right? And the person who's listening is always going to, he who asks the questions controls the conversation.
That's right.
Right. Who should we have on the show next? And then let's talk about Forum.
Yeah. So given the theme of the show, around getting the hell yes and great multifamily sales leaders and people who have been in this industry, I'm going to recommend Tim McInerney. He and I worked together at LRO, competed against each other. You ask him who won. He was there longer, but the year I was there, I beat him. But he also was a sales leader at Appfolio and Yardi, and then now he's leading sales and revenue at Reba, great multifamily startup doing revenue management and BI. Yeah, I'd recommend Tim.
Excellent. Well, Tim will be reaching out to you. Tell us about Forum.
Awesome. So Forum is a community event for people who believe in a new operating model. And what that means is centralization and automation. So we'll have about 200 attendees in Scottsdale in 2 weeks. There still is a few spots. So anybody who hears this and wants to join us, we can squeeze you in. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. And in particular, to your point earlier, it's really, we don't have vendor sponsors and we try to not sell. We do product roadmap updates. But the whole goal is just to facilitate storytelling and conversations, good, bad, and ugly. So in fact, our most popular session last year was GID got up and did a case study on their implementation, less so the funnel results and more so just like, here's how we got this deployed. And so this year we're doing 3 of those. So really cool opportunity to hear from UDR and BH about like, hey, what is it like going from property-centric to renter-centric, implementing centralization, implementing AI. So yeah, if you're interested in that sort of stuff, then it's right up your alley.
Well, it reflects what you're talking about, the lesson learned, right? Humility and asking questions, right? You're out there sharing stories of like with conviction around an occurrence. And I always find that when you have the Seth Godin's point about marketers are always liars, is that when you have your customer giving the conviction, then they are able to say it in their own words. And if you're listening closely enough, you can start learning the words they're using because that's how they think about it first. And if you go back to even like how they're going to solve the problem, but even heard about funnel. Like that's kind of what they're talking. It's what they're typing into Google, right? They're trying to articulate a problem in their own terms. If you're not listening for that, you're going to miss what they're trying to solve for.
That's right. Well said. Yeah. So I learned more from our customers than they learned from me at this event. So I'm really excited for it.
Right on. Right on. Well, thank you, sir. Thanks for going over. Everyone listening today, I appreciate you guys tuning in and listening. Certainly, Tyler, this is an incredible conversation. I really like how you closed in on humility at the very end, and certainly like your journey along the way and all the lessons that you kind of like been able to log and chalk up. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, please hit follow, subscribe. It makes it easier to find people or for people to find us. And then ultimately, if you're listening later on, any comments or things you want to add to it, we'd love to hear about that and chime in. Tyler, thanks again today. Appreciate you making the time. It's been a wonderful conversation. Certainly eye-opening for me and a chance for me to learn like you're learning at the same time in real time. So I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Awesome, Guillermo. Appreciate it. Take care.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.